Adam Wharton to Spurs would cost somewhere around £100 million this summer. An absolute astronomical fee for a defensive midfielder. But the real question is he even the right player to go for? Well, today I'm going to try and find out, like I did in my previous video, studying the data across Europe's top 5 leagues to see if we can find the best option for Thomas Frank in that sort of deep line playmaker position, number 6, whatever you want to call it. To me, it's all about the attributes that make a player. There are plenty of players out there that play this quote-unquote box-to-box number 8 that have the ability to play deep. So not all targets have gone and played in this position exactly before, which is why there are very specific sets of data that we're going to be looking into. So, but very quickly, before we get into this, please could you subscribe to the channel? We're doing our best to go for this analysis route. I'm going to be doing this throughout the season when it comes to analyzing matches. I'll be doing that through pre-season as well. If you like this sort of content, please like and subscribe because we are on the road to 100,000 subscribers. It's been a long time coming, but I really am determined to get there this season. Let's get into the video. I believe that Spurs are going to be targeting a deep line playmaker for this position. At Spurs currently, we've got a lot of ball carriers, but not someone that really excels at passing in these sort of deeper areas. The question is, what did Brentford excel at? Well, the first main thing is completed long passes. They were 3rd in the league. That just kind of really does show how much they valued quick transitions. As well as that, they were pretty high up for ball recoveries, very similar to us actually being, 6th in the league. Frank absolutely loves to press high up the pitch. Not too dissimilar to how Andrew would, to be fair, but that does mean they would get caught in transition sometimes. So you needed to be able to recover the ball really well. And they were the best at winning aerial duels. Physicality in this team is going to be key. No matter how we play, we need to be able to win our duels, whether it's on the ground or in the air. So now we're going to look into what their sort of defensive mids or their players were really good at to kind of understand how Thomas Frank's defensive mids play. So first of all, we're looking at progressive passing. Not only did their players have to be really strong, they also had to be really comfortable on the ball because more often than not, they would be sort of passing around in deep areas. And like I said, we're going to be looking for players that are comfortable on the ball to be able to hit players on the break. Now, it wasn't always the defensive mids that sort of created these chances. A lot of the times, a defensive mid in a Thomas Frank system had to be comfortable on the ball to lay it off to the fullback, and usually it was the fullback that would play the long balls, or even the goalkeeper. A lot of the times, Flecken would be the ones that are playing the long balls to the forwards. But you'll find more often than not, actually, that Keane Lewis-Potter at left back was the one that was creating a lot of strong chances. But the idea is the defensive mid would receive the ball, they'd have to comfortably play it off to their teammates, and they would start transitions, or they would just start them themselves. I mean, this is a list of all players in the Premier League last season, but I've highlighted the ones that were the more defensive midfielders in the league to see who really excelled at. And you can see Bruno Guimaraes, progressive passing was the highest of any defensive mid in the Premier League. Moises Caicedo, you're going to see him a lot at the top. He was phenomenal last season. But look, Norgard is extremely high up across the Premier League for progressive passing from defensive midfielders. Higher than any Spurs player, higher than any Man United defensive midfielder, higher than any Villa defensive midfielder. He was very good at progressing the ball forward. Tackles 1. All right, this one I didn't highlight every defensive midfielder here, but you can see Idrissa Gana Gueye was the highest, did really well. But again, someone we wouldn't be looking at because he's 34 years old, so kind of ignore that. Moises Caicedo coming in at 3rd. João Gomez came quite high up. And Norgard high up again for tackles 1. Showing his strength. When looking at that says dribblers tackled, by the way. When looking at the dribblers tackled metric on FBref, you would find it tended to be the defensive midfielders across the board in the Premier League that were high up on the list. Again, you got your likes of Idrissa Gana Gueye, Caicedo. Norgard was up as the 3rd or 4th highest defensive midfielder in the league. Another position that a Brentford DM really excelled at. Now, aerial duels, a lot of these players were obviously more your centre-backs. They're more likely to be in a situation where they would need to win headers when you're thinking of corners, etc. So I've just highlighted, again, the quote-unquote defensive midfielders that are on the list. At the highest was Thomas Souček. Then you got Wilfred Ndidi. And then next up was Christian Norgard. He was actually the 3rd highest across all quote-unquote defensive mids in the league, showing his absolute monstrous ability at winning the ball in the air. That was aerial duels 1, and I kind of looked at the percentage, and Caicedo high up yet again, and this guy's an absolute beast. Considering he's only 5'10" as well, really excels at this, 68.6%. Casemiro, Gravenberch, Tyler Adams, and then Norgard appearing yet again. So now we can start building a bit of a picture of what Brentford's defensive midfielders, or a six, however you want to call them, what they had to be good at by looking at what Christian Norgard was good at last year. So from all of those, the key metrics that I'm going to be focusing on in this video to see who can sort of replicate this role at Spurs, we're going to be looking at some passing data and of course per 90 as well, because not a lot of players would have played the same amount of minutes as each other. So I feel like progressive passing is going to be key. Progressive passing distance also tells us how good they are at playing the ball long from lower positions, and also passes into final third, because that was also something that Christian Norgard was good at as well. On to the more defensive action side, we saw how good Christian Norgard was at, winning tackles, so we kind of had a look at that and the percentage success rate. Dribblers tackled seemed to be a defensive midfielder thing across the board, and something he was also high up on. Recoveries is key, because we will be conceding transitions, because we will be pressing high up the pitch. It's going to happen throughout the season. And then finally, how good were these players in the air? So I hope you're with me so far. That's sort of me understanding what data I need to be looking at to determine the best possible options. And these were the results. So I looked at data for 27 possible targets. That is across all of the top 5 leagues, by the way. So there will be some players I miss. I know we've been linked to players like Hayden Hackney, but I kind of just focus on the top 5 leagues. Otherwise, I would actually lose my mind a little bit. Some were really great at the passing metrics. Some were really good at the defensive side of things, or aerially. Some were good at both. So we've got a broad width of options. You can already get a glimpse at the data here. You can see Christian Norgard is rated out, because one is for comparison's sakes, and two, he's obviously already joined Arsenal. Pedro Chirivella, I believe, has already joined Panathinaikos, but he was someone that came up quite highly when looking at League One, because he was playing at Nantes before. But across the board, these were the players that sort of came up the highest. If you want to pause this and have a quick read of the full list of the 27, I'm not going to go through every single one of them. The darker the green, or the darker the color, they were number 1 in that position, and I kind of did it for the top 5. So for progressive passes, these were the top 5: Stiller, Ederson, Yusuf Fofana, Pedro Chirivella, and João Gomez. This is more of a backroom idea of looking into this data that I have sort of collected together, so you can understand why my thought process and how I'm able to evaluate which players are good at what. Now let's narrow it down and move on to which ones that I thought were best at passing. Who are the best progressive passers in Europe amongst the defensive midfielders? Now, a lot of you would have seen his name knocking about, but this player had an unbelievable season with Stuttgart, and that is Angelo Stiller, 24 years old. This guy blew everyone out of the water when it came to progressive passing stats. What I've tried to do here is basically write down what they were, the statistic, and then in red you can see where they finished out of those players of my 27. For example, progressive passing, 289. He was first out of these 27, as we saw there from this graph here. He was first. Again, even accounting for per 90, because he played a lot of minutes, he was still first. Progressive passing distance, by a mile, he was first. Number 2 was Ederson with 8,500. Like, that is a ridiculous difference. Long completed passes, 170 was second. Per 90 drops down a bit to 7th, and the percentage long completed pass, he was a lot lower at 61%, so 14th. But again, look, passes into final third. First again, per 90, first. He's got 4 goals and 11 assists this season. Despite being a defensive midfielder, Norgard actually got 6 goals and 4 assists across the season as well. So I think the whole point is their role isn't just to be defensive. They need to be a good passer. They need to be able to contribute and attack, because like I said, Frank is going to play a double pivot, which means more often than not, players are going to swap roles. Whoever this new signing may be are going to play alongside someone like Bergvall or Sarr, and then maybe one of those will be a bit more defensive in a moment, and then this new signing can contribute in the attack. So to get 4 goals and 11 assists in all competitions for a defensive midfielder, I think is unbelievable. And then I got these graphs for every player from Data MB. It's actually really good at sort of plotting out what they excelled at. So apart from the percentages, the rest of these statistics are sort of done as a percentile. So you can see for progressive passing, compared to his peers across the top 7 leagues, I believe it is, he basically comes out in like the 99th percentile. What you will notice though is that possession 1 is a lot lower, and I've noticed this in my cons as well. When looking at his defensive data, the tackling and his tackles 1 was really, really low. In fact, he was the lowest for tackles 1, and he is very, very poor in the air. So there's a big trade-off for someone like Stiller. He is by far the best passer out of any of the options that I found that is technically available. Although that's looking less and less likely, because I believe Real Madrid are after him. But he does have a lot of deficiencies when it comes to his defensive capabilities, especially in a Frank team. And not only that, as amazing as he was at passing, when watching his clips after looking at the data, I noticed that he had a lot more time on the ball in the Bundesliga compared to the Premier League, which meant he was afforded more time to be able to play longer passes. He might not get that time in the Premier League, so will he get dispossessed a lot more? Potentially. There is a potential translation issue from the Bundesliga to the Premier League. Next up, who came up really highly, was Ederson of Atalanta. Now, he is typically a box-to-box midfielder. I think you'd say he's a quote-unquote 8, but again, it doesn't matter where they typically play in the team. It's about what are their attributes? What are they really good at? Could they play this role well? So again, looking at Ederson, obviously a bit older, maybe a bit more experienced. Obviously, he's got a lot of Champions League experience. Progressive passing came second. When we account for per 90, it drops a little bit in all of these. So he drops to 6th for progressive passing. Passing distance, he was 2nd overall, but again, dropped to about 11th when we look at per 90. Percentage long completed passes, much higher than Stiller. He actually went up to 5th. And he also got 5 goals and 2 assists in all competitions. So the thing is, his defensive stats aren't fantastic. Again, I think this is possibly to do with the fact that he was deployed more as this box-to-box midfielder for Atalanta. He may not necessarily have the most tackles compared to others because he might not have been in as many situations where that was needing to be happen. But when you actually watch him play football, he is a very, very strong footballer. And I think if he were to be in those positions more, I think he would be a decent player. And he is very good in the air. Apart from Norgard, he is the only one that was in the top 5 across all 3 of these. Next up, there's someone that came up highly is Yacine Adli. Now, he is technically an AC Milan player, but he spent last season on loan at Fiorentina. This one is a bit interesting because he actually didn't play a crazy amount of minutes, as you can sort of see in my cons here. He played 1,653 minutes. A lot of these other players are touching well over 2,000. But what I find fascinating is that his per 90 data was very strong. Look, as you can see here, progressive passing overall 25th, overall the distance was 23rd. When we look at it per 90, 2nd for progressive passing, 2nd for the distance, 1st for how many long completed passes he made, 5th for how many passes into the final third per 90. And he also contributed to 5 goals and 7 assists, which I think is very, very, very high for a player that only played 1,600 minutes across the board last season. And he was sort of playing in this defensive sort of mid role last year. And again, like very similar to the previous guys here, you can really see like the key passing is strong, progressive passing is really strong, forward pass is really strong. Actually, his carrying ability is strong as well. Possession 1, not fantastic, and his tackling stats weren't the best either. Is also very weak in the air. And it's so tough. It's because there isn't just one player that excels across everything, and I mean like is at the top across the board. Next up was Nicolo Rovella of Lazio, 23 years old. He was the 4th best on the list, but you can see it sort of drop off a little bit. For progressive passing 6th. When you count it for per 90, he does drop off a fair bit to 15th. Progressive passing distance, he's 3rd, but then drops to 9th. Long completing passing, he's 1st, but then that drops to 4th. Still pretty good though. Percentage long completed pass 7th. Passes into the final third, he is 3rd, per 98th. 0 goals, 4 assists in all competitions. I've watched a fair bit of Rovella this season actually, because obviously they were in the Europa League with us. I know we didn't end up playing them, but when we're in the competition, I kind of end up watching the other teams in it. And yeah, he's very, very assured on the ball. Very good player. And actually, to be honest, compared to some of these other players in this passing sort of section, he's also good at winning the ball back. Again, another big weakness though is just in the air. He is the 3rd lowest per 90 for aerial duels won out of all 27 players. When it comes to making this signing, there's going to have to be a real toss-up as to what we are going to prioritize. Are we going to prioritize someone that is absolutely insane on the ball, like a Stiller, but then they're not as strong? Can they win the ball back when tackling? Can they win the ball in the air if it's contested in that sort of situation? What Frank is going to prioritize, we don't know yet until we make that signing. But these are just the best that are at sort of creating in from deeper positions. Next up is Adrian Bernabe. 24 years old, played for Parma. He just sort of is next on the list. Someone that, again, didn't play as many minutes as others, so it's more per 90 where he's sort of excelled. I believe he is from the Barcelona academy. He's also was at Man City at one point in his youth days, but has since moved abroad. But for me, this is someone, I mean, he is a very short player. He's 5'7", bottom of the list when it comes to winning the ball in the air, and he hasn't got the strongest defensive stats. And I think the reason why you can see underneath me his duel percentage is so high, I think that's going to be more offensive duels. I believe that will be him, you know, carrying the ball, taking on players. I think that will count as an offensive duel, which is why it's probably so high. I don't see him being a main option. I think it was just interesting to see sort of ex-Man City, ex-Barcelona academy prospect performing really well per 90 when it comes to the passing side of things. I don't think he'll be strong enough for the Premier League, but just another option. Those are sort of the top 5. Now, very interestingly, this man didn't come up into the top 5, but did have some pretty good data as well, and someone that we've been linked to heavily. So I thought we would discuss him anyway, and that is Adam Wharton, 21 years old. He was injured for a fair bit of this season, so his minutes aren't as strong as the other players, which is why you'd see his progressive passing was 24th out of 27. However, accommodating for per 90, he shoots up to 3rd, which goes to show when he does play, his passing's very good. And to be honest, you don't need data to see that. We've seen Wharton week in, week out. We all know his ability to play from deep is phenomenal. He is really, really good. Again, you see the distance. He jumps up from 26th to 13th. The long completed pass, it jumps up from 21st to 9th. I think he has other benefits. When you're playing in the Premier League and you're homegrown, that's always going to help. We need at least one homegrown player, irrespective of the sort of UEFA Champions League club trained issue. That's a whole other thing. I believe we've only got 7 out of 8 homegrown players, so we will need to sign a homegrown player. And we do seem to be focusing a lot on Premier League right now, because I think there's less risk of how a player plays in other leagues translating into the Premier League. If he's already doing well in this league, then why not? But that does mean he comes with a very, very hefty price tag, most likely close to 100 million, which if we know Spurs, that's not something we usually do, although we seem to be spending a lot more money this summer. He does have a very big weakness that he is not good in the air, but what he is very good at is recovering the ball and intercepting the ball. And to be fair, he actually came up as the highest Premier League player when it came to progressive passing. So even though overall he didn't beat the likes of Stiller, he wasn't ahead of Ederson, he was still the highest Premier League player. Okay, so those are the passes. We're going to move probably swiftly through the defensive action ones, who were technically the strongest midfielders in Europe that I came across. I think the problem is we're not going to be looking for a player that is just an out-and-out monster. So if a player only excels in these areas, I don't think we're going to sign them. But it's worth looking at who were the best and if there was any crossover between those that were good at passing as well. Highest, I think by a mile, to be honest with you, was João Gomez of Wolves. Tackles, he was first, even per 90 second. Tackles won first, per 90 second. Dribblers tackled, he was joint first with Norgard and Carlos Baleba from Brighton. Cons, medium long passing, really poor. And yeah, like I said before, aerial really poor. So next highest up, and I'm sorry if I pronounced his name wrong, Mikel Yarogitha, Athletic Bilbao defensive midfielder. Now, he didn't play a crazy amount of minutes this season. Tackles, he was joint second, per 90 third. Success rate 23rd. I think it's the same as João Gomez. When you're committing so many, you're bound to lose some of them. Dribblers tackled, he was joined 4th. Per 90, he actually jumps up to 1st. Recoveries, he was kind of middle of the pack at 12th. Aerial duels 1. Now, this is actually very interesting. He weren't necessarily the highest across the board. I think 7th and 6th is still pretty decent. He is 5'10", which, hey, isn't short. 5'10" is not short, but considering how high up he was on the list, it's just quite surprising. Decent. A very decent, strong player for someone that isn't really the biggest. And yeah, when looking at the cons, his long-range passing is okay, but in general, his passing statistics weren't left to be desired. I mean, you can even look at that little graph on the right-hand side. The forward passing percentage, key passing. Yeah, not the best. Progressive passing was decent. It's just not... It's nothing to write home about at all. And yes, what I noticed a lot as well is that he rushes a lot when it comes to his passing. Only 21 years old. Could he be trained to do that better? I don't know. The Premier League is not forgiving. Now, this player is someone I think would have to watch out for across the board, not just for Spurs. 17-year-old Ayoub Bouadi for Lille. This is an unbelievable talent coming through the ranks currently. But when we look at his per 90, he goes up to first for tackles won, fourth for dribblers tackled. He is a very, very, very tall player for someone who is only 17 years old and is clearly very strong. He's already got Champions League experience, and he beat Real Madrid 1-0 in the Champions League, which I also believe was his birthday. His pass completion is strong at medium and long range, but the volume wasn't there. And look, you could see it there. Like, his forward passing completion is really high up, but the actual amount of progressive passing and key passes and forward passes isn't that high. So that kind of tells me that when he does decide to do these sort of progressive and forward passing maneuvers, he is very good at them. He just doesn't do it enough. That might not be his role at Lille. That could be down to the other, especially when you're looking at his tackles. I think he's mainly used to sort of screen the defense, sort of sit in front of them. I don't think this is someone we buy now, because I think we're looking for someone with more experience. But I promise you, this is going to be the next best talent coming through. I believe he is a French/Moroccan international. I'm not sure he's chosen his national team yet, but he has the ability to play for France or Morocco. This is a very, very exciting talent. Carlos Baleba, another Premier League player. We've seen him week in, week out. We know he's a strong player, and in fact, he was so good against Spurs as well. Tackles, he's quite high up. Dribblers tackled, joint first. Like I said earlier, that was with João Gomez and Norgard, I believe. Percentage dribblers tackled 7th. Recoveries 2nd. And in the air, he's pretty decent. Aerial duels 1/6 per 97th, percentage errors 3rd, also has 4 goals and 2 assists. Baleba is a very strong player, but he excels in ball carrying, not necessarily progressive passing. He would also cost a lot of money. I think Brighton would demand about 80 million-ish pounds. I just don't know if it's the profile we need exactly. Like, I love Carlos Baleba. If there's an opportunity to sign him, I think a lot of top Premier League teams will be all over him. But do we need someone else that is good at carrying the ball? I don't know. And it's not to say he can't pass it. And like I've said in the sort of the bottom there at the sort of the cons, his passing completion percentage is high. Again, so when he does make progressive passes, his ability to do them is good. Is it a case that he can coach and trained differently, maybe play a slightly different role than he is at Brighton? I don't know. When you're looking at the like of Adam Wharton, who's already kind of tailor-made for this deep line playmaker role, is it worth it? Not too sure, but someone who is just very strong, great at carrying the ball, and good in the air as well, just not necessarily the best at passing from deep. And then finally, for the defensive actions, Nicolo Rovella actually came up high again. 2nd for tackles, 3rd for tackles won, 4th for dribblers tackled. When it comes to per 90, he does drop slightly down to 7th and then 7th. But overall, is actually pretty good at winning the ball back. Again, like we discussed before though, he is so weak in the air. I just don't know if Frank is going to willing to sacrifice that. I don't know. So Nicolo Rovella is one of the few players that actually is a brilliant passer and was actually decent at tackling. Moving on, I have 2 bonus players that caught my eye this summer. The first one, Lucien Agume. If you've been on Twitter, X, what you want to call it, people talk about this player a lot. For France under-21s in the tournament this summer, he looked very, very good. His passing is not his main strength. He has a good passing range, considering the fact that he's in a very struggling Sevilla side. They finished 17th. Does that sound familiar? I don't know. But for a team that struggled, it is pretty good. He looked a lot more comfortable in these areas for France under 21s this summer at passing out and playing in these sort of positions. And he's also a very good ball carrier. But when you do look at the clips, sometimes he does take a bit too long to shimmy the opposition. Obviously, he kind of waits for them to get a bit closer to kind of turn the players and go. Sometimes would wait a bit too long, which means he does get caught out. But again, if we're looking for this role to be more about their passing ability, maybe Frank can sort of coach him to maybe pass out of these situations as opposed to carrying. But it's good to know that he's good at both. Key passes are quite high. Forward passing and passing percentage quite high. Progressive passing is actually pretty decent. And this is one of the very few graphs actually where he seemed to be very good across the board. The defensive actions is where he becomes really, really, really strong. Tackles per 90, 4th. Percentage dribblers tackled 2nd on the list. He's in the top 10 for the dribblers tackled and per 90 recoveries, and he's 2nd for per 90 interceptions, which means if we get quite on transition, I trust him to be able to win this ball back so that we can start the attack again. He's a very, very strong player. And again, that is replicated in the air as well. We seem to be hoarding this the French young players this season, or the last couple of seasons. So someone to keep an eye on. This next final player is the one that I am excited about the most. And the more I've looked into it, the more I think he could be absolutely phenomenal for Thomas Frank. And that is Lamine Camara from Monaco, 21 years old. He is in the top 10 on my list for all passing metrics per 90, including 5th for per 90 long completed pass. And you can see this FBref. I'm kind of just getting this screenshot just to get an idea of his passing in general. What FBref tend to do is they compare to the players in the same position as them across top 5 leagues, Champions League, and Europa League, I believe. And look how high up he's like. He's basically in the 80+ percentile for almost all passing metrics, especially when it comes to, you know, medium passing, long passing as well. His passing ability is so strong. It's worth mentioning, he's again another player that is technically an 8. To kind of paint a picture, for Monaco, he plays alongside a double pivot with Zakaria. They both share a lot of their defensive duties. This is why I think it could really translate well to a Frank team. We're going to need a player that is good defensively, but also good going forward and good passing. So maybe when Kamara is going forward, a Bergvall or Sarr might sit back. He's actually Sarr's teammate for Senegal as well, and vice versa. When we look at the defensive actions, he's actually still 5th on the list for per 90 tackles and per 90 tackles won. He's 6th for percentage tackle success rate, and he's 2nd for recoveries per 90. So not only do we have someone who is clearly very good at passing the ball, he is also very good at winning the ball back. Look at his possession won, very high up. His main weakness, and again, which is potentially why we might not sign him, is the fact he's also not very good in the air. He's 5'8", which is quite short for a midfielder. He wasn't the worst in the air on the list. He was middle of the pack. But when we think about how physical a Frank side is in the air, this could be the only drawback. When, like we said before, when we look at how good he is at winning the ball back, as well as passing the ball, I think he's one of the few on this list who is this quote-unquote unicorn that we're after, who is good at passing the ball from deep, but also great at winning the ball back. He's also got 2 goals and 7 assists this season, which kind of just goes to show he's able to contribute in attack as well as defense. I think, for me personally, this is such an exciting player if we don't go for a Premier League proven player. So what are my final decisions? What's the top 3 choices of all of these? I think, I've been alluding to it, I think Lamine Camara for me would be number 1 when we're looking at all these metrics and these data. Who excelled the most across the board, and I think would be the best in a double pivot under Frank, I think it would be Lamine Camara. However, I also have Ederson and Adam Wharton very high up for very different reasons. Adam Wharton, we've discussed the factors. He's brilliant at long-range passing. English, homegrown, doesn't have to translate to a different league because he already knows the Premier League. Obviously, like I said before, the drawbacks are the fact he's not good in the air, but we just don't know what Frank wants. Ederson, despite quote-unquote being a box-to-box midfielder, I think he has all the attributes to be a good deep-line playmaker. His passing is really good. He contributes in attack. But not only that, he's aggressive. He's a very aggressive player, so he can win the ball back. I know that's a lot to go through. I really appreciate you guys watching this video if you stuck around this far. Those are my top choices. Let me know what you think of everything I've shown you so far. Is there anyone that I potentially missed in maybe in other leagues? But let me know if you want me to do these sort of videos more often, because I'm really enjoying going into deep diving into data, then looking at videos of the players after to see how that translate in the real world. I've just laid out the groundwork for you guys there. Who would you prefer on this list? Let me know in the comment section down below. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.